For example, my father can no longer form a sentence most of the time, and yet he can break into song and sing an entire song, pretty much, if it goes back far enough in his memory. So the music is going through the entire brain is how it's processed. And because it goes also, like the thalamus is part of that. Actually, that's the first part that processes it. So that emotion stays. Even when the memories are gone, if you take someone's wedding song and you're playing that for them, they may, in their mind, be 10 years old, never been married, because dementia residents progress in their memory. But the emotion that comes from that wedding song or from any song that they associate with a happy or strong emotional event, the emotion's still going to be there. So it's going to have an effect on them and it's going to lift them.
I mentioned earlier in the show, but you actually reached out and texted me yesterday when we played a piece of tape from the Maritimes. It was about a musician who creates music for people in their final moments. Mm-hmm. Why did that strike a certain chord with you?
Oh, well, so yeah, I actually have recorded some music with my dad that I intend to have played at my funeral.
Right.
Or while I'm, if I'm actively dying and we're aware of it and there's time for me to have a playlist, I would like to be listening to that just because of the strong emotion for me, the great memories. So that's kind of part of it. Some people think that's morbid. I just think it's, to have Dad and I singing to me at that point would be the best thing, But there's a lot of other things that could be considered as well. Other than that, there's more than spiritual or gospel music. Everybody knows I want Gordon Lightfoot on my headphones and Steve Bell, and so it's just things that your family knows. But
and you've also experienced that with people who you've worked with.
yes,
sort of in those final moments.
Over and over, yes.
Yeah.
I have. Mm-hmm.
Any story where the family sort of felt like there was a disconnect, but you were able to bring life back into that person?
Yeah. Oh, sure. I had a client in Calgary, and she was living in a home. She was in one of my small group music therapy groups. And so I'd been working with her for quite some time. She couldn't quite form sentences anymore. She was a brilliant woman with an illustrious career behind her and a very loving family. And the families would hire me to go in and, to provide some quality of life and to help connect. And anyway, when she had actually gone into a coma, she had a stroke. So, of course, I went to the hospital to visit her because I become very attached to my residents. And so while I was there, I said to the family, why don't you go take a break, get a coffee, I'll stay. And her granddaughter wanted to stay with me while I played. She just was curious. And then now the resident had not shown any signs of awareness to her family or the doctors. So when I started to do all her favorite songs that I knew she preferred was old Scottish folk songs, she reacted. She started to mouth along with about half of the words in the song. She wasn't making any sound. She did not open her eyes. And yet you could tell that it was getting through to her and evoking a response. And the entire family was called back to the bedside, and they were crying. They were so emotional, but they had that proof that she could hear them. So unfortunately, the woman didn't survive another 6 hours, but at least for that last few hours of her life, they were able to hold her hand and talk to her and reminisce with her and know that she was hearing them. And they even were singing to her after that.
Wow. It's such a science and something that you understand, but it feels new to me. But the idea that our brains connect with that and it brings that emotion and can connect us with loved ones as well.
There's something intrinsic in music that people want to connect and complete. For example, if you have a resident that has speech difficulties because of a stroke and they're not responding to speech therapy, you can do a really simple technique called lining out, where you might sing, "You are my," and then if you don't complete that, you slow the sentence down and then you lean into them with your guitar or whatever, and they will try to do the words. So if they're not speaking because of depression and because all of a sudden they feel helpless, then you've just created a bridge where they're going to make a connection and really try, and most of the time you have great success with using a lining out on people that have had a stroke.
That's interesting because you hear often of people with a stutter who can sing.
Who can sing. That's right.
Is that sort of the same
It's
type
very,
of thing?
it is, because of the way that, like I was mentioning, how music is processed globally in your brain. The speech patterns, your control of speech is controlled by one part of your brain. Music is processed globally. Everything is involved in that.
I was mentioning earlier that after I spoke with you on the phone yesterday, I went home to my husband and I said, we need to make a playlist. We need to listen to the same song every day. If anything happens, I took it to a 12. But if anything happens, I need to make sure that we're still connected. How now bring me back down to a normal level. How can we prepare for something like dementia or aging by using music in our own life? Do we start a playlist? Is it just going to work its own way out?
I think it'll work its own way out, Amy. It's not, if you're a family, they're going to know what you love. In some cases, I've been brought in as a therapist because the family is no longer to communicate or doesn't know how to connect with them. And I teach them how to make those connections using hand drums, using simple percussion instruments, simple melodies. You don't have to play a guitar. You can sit next to someone and hold their hand, create rhythm, and do things. But knowing what they like as far back as their childhood songs, their what was popular when they were a teenager. I heard you chuckling earlier about a song that you and your daughter would dance to from Alexa. Yeah. There's stuff that my dad, little lilting, silly rhymes dad would sing to me when I was a little girl. We still do them together.
Right.
They're still in his mind and they're funny and, it's a lot of fun. So knowing the person is the first big step, really.
Yeah.
And when you get to the point, if they can't speak to you anymore, you can use rhythm and you can use music. And, if you can find a music therapist to help you and guide you, that's so much the better.
And you've mentioned, but your father has dementia and your husband's here. Michael's here sitting in the studio as well. He's waving.
Yes.
How do you use music to connect with your own loved ones?
We just do a lot of music at home.
Yeah.
I had a musical on a couple of days ago, Oklahoma, and my dad's sitting there and he's finishing up his tea. And all of a sudden he breaks into, "Oh, what a beautiful morning." And we're all singing together, because he can still do that even though he can't form a sentence. And we did a funeral together last year. We've played funerals, weddings, all kinds of events.
Still singing together.
We're still singing together, and it takes some cueing. You have to keep them on task and focused, but I'm able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And last year when we did the first 3 songs that we opened with at the funeral, he was doing from memory. There was no words in front of him. He was watching me. So... it's so we just do a lot. We dance, we sing, we hum.
What about your husband? What about Michael?
Michael, when I would play piano in the living room, he would worm his way over and sit down beside me. The next thing I know, he'd be singing along. If he didn't know the words, he'd just make them up. And this goes back 15 years, So it's nothing new now. One of my sisters once told me that hanging around with him and I was like living in a musical. We dance and sing all the time. It's just normal for us, But it helps mood. They're always happy. They're always smiling and cracking jokes. And so I really think that it makes a huge difference in how the quality of life is lived out day to day and moment to moment.
Lisa, this has been such a joy having you here. And I love seeing Michael sitting in the background watching you. He's waving. He's so excited to be here.
Yep.
And just hearing how...
He's my biggest fan.
He is your biggest fan. Appreciate it. Lisa Doig is a music therapist in Windsor, joining us in the studio this morning. The time now is 7:25.